In this video, we're going to be looking at the movement of throwing, in particular an overhand throw. This involves propelling the ball towards a specific point with the hand and arm. The overhand throw fits into the category of projection. In order to look at the overhand throwing movement, we're going to break it down into 3 different stages. So that will be the preparation stage, the throwing action, and the follow-through actions. The very first thing we want to expect our overhand throwers to be doing, if they're a developed thrower, is to be side-facing. However, in these videos, neither of the participants are facing sideways, so they both have some room for improvement, for sure. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is that the arm is brought or circled downwards and backwards in order to create a W shape with the arms and the body. So we can see here that the developed thrower has begun to make that shape with the arms and body. As well, what we want to be looking for in the preparation stage is that the participants have their eyes on the target. In this case, it would be the wall across from them. Moving on to the actual throwing action, we want to see the foot opposite of the throwing hand step forward. So we can see that the left foot of the developed thrower has stepped forward, and he has the ball in his right hand, so that is the opposite foot of the throwing hand moving forward. However, with the developed thrower, we can see that both of her legs remain straight, and she doesn't make any attempt to swing her arm back and move that foot forward. She actually just stays in a straight stance the entire time that she's preparing to throw the ball. So the purpose of having that opposite foot step forward is actually to create rotation in the hips and then as well as shoulders and the body. And what this does is creates momentum for the ball in order to propel it forward. In the case of the developing thrower, she hasn't created any momentum at all by using that step forward or by swinging her hand back in order to prepare for throwing the ball. So the ball is not going to travel as far because it won't have any momentum to propel it. So the thing that's important to notice in the process of throwing this ball is that the hips should be rotating forward before the rest of the body does. In this case, we can see that his hips are almost facing forward, whereas his shoulder is still tilted to the back just slightly, which is evidence that his hips have rotated forward before the rest of the upper body. Again, in the case of the developing thrower, she hasn't rotated her body at all and is still standing in a forward-facing, straight position. In the last part of the throwing action, we want to be able to see that ball released just in front of the head. So in the developed thrower's case, the ball has actually already left his hand, but it was just before his head that he actually released the ball in order to propel it forward. In the case of a developing thrower, we can see that the ball is a little bit further away when it actually leaves her hand. So in proportion to both of their bodies, her hand is quite a bit further forward when she actually lets go of the ball. From there, we can move into the follow-through actions. And what we're looking for here is that the throwing hand is going to be pointing forward to the target after releasing the ball. So we can see that the younger developing thrower is pointing her hand forward to the target, which is good. I'm just going to rewind it ever so slightly. So we can see that the developed thrower has pointed his arm straight forward and has it towards the target that he's trying to hit. Lastly, and very importantly, we want to see that hand actually come across the body and down towards the hip of the opposite leg. In the case of the developed thrower, we can see that he's brought his arm across and down towards the other side of his body. However, the developing thrower simply brings her arm straight down and towards the same side of the body again. This action also creates momentum and allows the participants to experience a sort of following through of the action. The biggest difference between the two throwers that we will be able to notice is that there's no attempt to create momentum in the developing thrower. Although they have some knowledge of how to propel the ball forward, there isn't any knowledge of how to use the opposite foot to step forward and then from there rotate the hips and the upper body, as well as bring that hand down across the body to the other side after throwing it. Each of these movements helps to create momentum. In order to work with students or participants on creating those momentum type movements, we could actually break them down into chunks and have them practice just propelling the ball forward while using the opposite foot forward and not rotating their body. As well, we could have them stand with both feet shoulder width apart at the same position and then just attempting to rotate their body in order to project the ball forward. If we break this down into the separate components of movements, we can eventually combine them and have them become more comfortable with those movements all together. It would also help to have some key phrases or words to use when instructing kids on the overhand throwing techniques, such as twist or hand to knee, in an attempt to encourage some of those different movements, such as rotation and bringing that other, or the throwing arm down across the body to the other side. So those are the different criteria that I have been looking for in an overhand throwing movement and the differences between a developing and developed thrower.